Hey everybody, I'm East Coast Pete. Welcome to my show, Midrock Crisis. Uh, this is the show that tries to save rock, one band at a time. And yes, we're finally at a point where we're going to try and do a show about the Ramones. You've all been waiting for it, and here it is. Without further... before I get going, I did want to mention a couple of things. I was not really a Ramones fan in the 70s. As I probably told you, I was still listening to the music that my own band played back then, which consisted primarily of Black Sabbath and Grand Funk Railroad and Mountain, The Who, stuff like that. And when the punk scene began, I actually felt kind of threatened by it because I didn't really understand it. But over the years, I've come to the point where I have learned to appreciate it to a great extent, and I hope you will too. Without further ado, the Ramones. Oh, by the way, this is probably going to be a pretty long show. If you want to hit pause and go get a drink or a snack, I've got a lot of material to cover here. Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy came from Forest Hills, Queens of all places. Everyone knows they're not related. It was just a huge coincidence that they all had the same last name. And their anthem, "Hey Ho, Let's Go," is from a line in the Rolling Stones cover of Walking the Dog, and that line is actually "High Ho's Tippy Toes." And Paul Ramone, he was a pretty boy bassist back in old Liverpool, and Dee Dee liked the sound of that. Beat the Brat with a baseball bat never happened, but Joey thought maybe it should have. The Ramones songs were fast, primarily to save money in the studio. But now they're known as the first true punk band, and their first album actually has a copy in the U.S. Library of Congress. Johnny's Bird and all. The librarians collect music that has had a significant effect on history. Someday, in the distant future, a cyborg may find it in the stacks. "Hey Chris, look what I found next to Rock-Midrock." I jest. Ramones played 2,263 live shows in 22 years, and they are ranked 26th in Rolling Stone magazine's 100 Greatest Artists of All Time. And in 2002, they were inducted into the Hall of Fame. Here's a quick side note about John Cummings, who became known as Johnny Ramone. When he was 19 years old, he had a moment of clarity, and he gave up taking drugs. He gave up heavy drinking. He gave up having a bad attitude. He decided to become a businessman and put together a band that played music that he liked the way it sounded. And he never looked back. And he was all business. He was even a conservative, politically type of voter. He liked he liked Bush. If he were alive today, I wonder what he'd say about what's going on. Unfortunately, of course, Joey Ramone, he was a liberal, and you think those two are brothers at arms? Well, they didn't always get along so well. We'll get into that later. Going back to 1965, John Cummings and Tom Erdely played in a garage band known as Tangerine Puppets. Doug Colvin from Germany and Jeff Hyman from almost nowhere they were in the band Sniper. Colvin wanted to play guitar and sing. Hyman would be the drummer. Rich Stern tried bass, but he wasn't any good at it. So, Colvin switched from guitar to bass, and Cummings would be the only guitarist. Colvin was the first to name himself Ramone. He was now Dee Dee Ramone. Hyman liked the idea of a stage name, so then he was Joey Ramone. Cummings went along with this idea and became Johnny Ramone. Dee Dee had difficulty singing and playing bass at the same time. It's harder than it looks. So now Joey would be singing and playing drums, except that's just as hard as playing bass and singing, so Joey became the lead singer without the drumming. Joey's former bandmate, Erdelie, wanted to manage the band, but instead became Tommy Ramone, the band's drummer. Their stage debut at CBGB's in New York City, down on the Bowery, was August 16th, 1974. In their black motorcycle jackets, worn jeans, sneakers, holes in the knees, along with their roaring volume and breakneck speed, the denizens of the dark in the audience saw these guys weren't just another hippie band. This was something different. Yeah. The band played CBGB's in Max's Kansas City often. The Ramones show averaged only 17 minutes. The fresh approach of 2-minute songs without guitar solos or jams appealed to the diverse audience. A representative from Sire Records saw the Ramones and wasted no time in signing them. Linda Stein and Danny Fields would now manage. Dee Dee wrote most of the lyrics, but all 4 guys were listed as equal partners. Johnny wanted it that way, mostly because he was all business and became de facto leader of the Ramones. Critics surprisingly got on board, calling them authentic American primitives. The Ramones played Los Angeles, and overnight the LA punk scene took hold. This happened again in Toronto as well, but the linchpin was their short visit to London. They met Mark Bolan, glam rock icon with T-Rex. They met the guys in the Clash, and they met the Sex Pistols. The London music scene never recovered. At the Roundhouse in London, ironically on July 4th, 1976, the UK punk scene was born. You'd hear the Ramones' jackhammer set, and you would want to get an electric guitar as soon as possible and start a band. This all took on a life of its own, like the kids have been waiting for it. The Sex Pistols upstaged the Ramones with their safety pins, spitting on the audience and vomiting during their set. Ramones never did any of that. And Tommy was exhausted from the touring. He went back to managing in '78. Mark Bell took over on drums. He was now Marky Ramone. '76, their album The Ramones. It is everything people said about it. How could an album of 2-minute loud pop songs get such glowing praise from critics who wouldn't even throw Led Zeppelin a bone? And then promotion couldn't stimulate sales. People just weren't ready to buy into it immediately. The appeal of rawness and honesty was there, but it took a while before there was a market for the records. The Ramones were the opposite of prog and arena rock. Their iconic eagle logo was displayed on the back on a black banner with white letters and was hung behind the drum kit. The Ramones only used white stage lights at this time in their shows. No nonsense. '77, Leave Home. The band actually had 3 albums worth of 2-minute numbers. They simply released them in the order of their set without putting their favorites all on one album. There was one exception. Carbona Not Blue was supposed to be on Leaving Home, but manager Danny told them that Carbona was a registered trademark and they need written permission to put it on the record. It was replaced at the last minute by Sheena Was a Punk Rocker from their third album, Rocket to Russia. Swallow My Pride went to number 36 in the UK. That was the summer so many new punk bands got record contracts. The Ramones were showing how it was done. Rockaway Beach was a fitting anthem for that summer, the same way Alice Cooper's Schools Out did that for the summer of '72, only 5 short years back. In '77, Rocket to Russia, Rockaway Beach, Teenage Lobotomy, Trashmen cover Surfin' Bird. Johnny later said that this was his favorite Ramones album. Cretin Hop, the first song on side one, announces that the band is not going away. Sheena was placed back in the correct order, and all was well. Or was it? In '78, The Road to Ruin. As I said before, Tommy was not liking the touring, so he went back to New York and worked in the studio as a producer. Change seems like not a big deal, you just get a new guy, but the band's equilibrium was altered. Marky Ramone was an experienced drummer, having played with Richard Hell and the Voidoids. He had to quickly learn the set. At the same time, the band's poor sales prompted them to put out radio-friendly songs, but this plan backfired. Sales became even worse. In 1980, End of the Century album, this was a desperate move, but Phil Spector was contracted to produce. The result was an album that sounded nothing like the Ramones. And they didn't like what Spector was doing, especially with Joey. Now, Joey's OCD had always been an issue, but he liked Spector's attention. Spector saw him as the star of the Ramones. That's sort of how Spector saw bands. A frontman is everything. The rest are nothing, I guess. Dee Dee was using more coke, and Marky didn't know what faction to join, but he joined with Joey. And then Johnny pulled a Keith Richards / Anita Pallenberg move with Joey's girlfriend Linda. Joey and Johnny's rift grew wider, and the album did not chart. In '81, Pleasant Dreams. Graham Gouldman was brought in to produce, and the album was better than Century, but it still didn't feel like a Ramones album. Joey wrote The KKK Took My Baby Away about Johnny and Linda. Joey wanted the band to play pop, and Johnny wanted to play hard rock. Now, where have I heard this before? In '83, Subterranean Jungle. Johnny insisted on returning to hard rock roots. He thought, screw the radio, let's just make a good record. Dee Dee wrote 6 tracks and Joey wrote 3. Marky was in need of rehab, but then he was fired. In '84, Too Tough to Die. Dee Dee sings too. You know, he's better at writing than singing. Richie on drums, Tommy produced. Joey's singing sounds radically different. I believe the time with Phil Spector had an effect upon Joey. It started sounding like what Joey thought a punk rock should sound like, rather than what a Ramones album should sound like. In '86, Animal Boy. Synthesizer Ramones, now I've heard everything. And all is not well in Joeytown. Just look at his photo on the monkey sleeve. In '87, Halfway to Sanity. It's the last Richie album. And Debbie Harry sang on Go Little Camaro Go. And the fans thought that this was somehow sacrilege. In '89, Brain Drain. C.J. Ramone takes over on bass. Dee Dee wants to be a rapper and quits the band. Chris Ward takes over on bass. Marky came back on drums. Pet Sematary track received radio play because of its appearing on the Stephen King movie of the same name. Johnny said that this was his least favorite Ramones album. 92, Mondo Bizarro. CJ on bass. Censorship addresses Tipper Gore and the Parents Music Resource Center, which became famous with Frank Zappa testifying in Congress. Dee Dee wrote 3 songs in order to pay back the bail bond he had to borrow from the band in 1993, Acid Eaters. It's a covers album. Bands toward the end of their career, they tend to put out songs that they feel have been a big part of their own music listening. This is an interesting album. It's worth a listen. There's covers of Ted Nugent, The Who, The Stones, Jefferson Airplane, Seeds, The Animals, Bob Dylan, Creedence Clearwater, The Troggs, Jan and Dean, and more. And in '95, Adios Amigos. Guess what this one's about? The Tom Waits cover, I Don't Want to Grow Up, charted. Dee Dee sang on Born to Die in Berlin. The dinosaur sleeve art references the Ramones being middle-aged. Johnny's autobiography, Commando, tells it like it was. Go check that out if you want to find out any more about these times. It's written in Johnny's hard-edged, hard-playing, similar rhetorical way of describing what was happening from his viewpoint. And did you know that the first Ramones album was the only one to go gold? And it actually took 38 years to do that. 2001, Joey died of lymphatic cancer. In 2002, Dee Dee OD'd on heroin. 2003, New York City posted a permanent sign designated East 2nd Street on the corner of the Bowery as Joey Ramone Place. 2004, Johnny died of prostate cancer. Tommy, Marky, and Richie, all the drummers, were left. They accepted a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award on behalf of the band. In 2013, Tommy Ramone died of bile duct cancer. Everything on your bodies can get cancer, it seems. 2016, Ramones Way, unveiled at the intersection of 67th Avenue and 110th Street in front of Forest Hills High School in Queens. In 2018, Richie Ramones, I Know Better Now, My Life Before, During, and After the Ramones is also a must-read for fans who want to know about this incredible experience of music and life. Now I'm going to reveal a secret that I have uncovered. Maybe it's an opinion, I don't know. Let's call it a secret, it sounds better that way. Here it is. The Ramones were not a punk rock band. Nope. They never intended to be punk rockers. They just wanted to play rock and roll the way they thought it should be played. And all this stuff that came afterward, the media turned it into a scene. The way the media turns things into scenes to keep the ball rolling on Fashion Avenue. Did it in the 50s, did it again in the 60s, and now it's the 70s, and here's the Ramones setting the world on its ear. Not because a lot of people were buying their records, because their music was different and fresh. They were a rock band with a capital R. Thanks for being with me on Midrock Crisis, a show that's trying to save rock one song at a time. What do I mean by that? I know I've talked about this before, but the kids have a lot of protesting to do today. Why don't you make some music about it? It's not hard to play. You can see here. Of course, this looks a lot easier than it actually is. You gotta have a lot of energy, folks. And you gotta really want to write songs and make them happen. and you got to get along with your bandmates at least about halfway through your career. So that's what I'm looking for you guys to do. Rock music doesn't have to be passé. You don't have to spend your whole life playing video games. Write some protest songs and get them out. I'm begging you. Thanks for being with me. See you next time.